there's a really loud motorcycle going by. I want it delicious, sexy. You can see tears fall from my eyes evidently as I speak right now. Hello, book reading friends. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel, and welcome to a new video, and welcome specifically to the mid-year freakout book tag. I genuinely cannot believe that we have rolled into this time of year already, where we're chatting and catching up on how our reading has been going for the first half of the year. I feel like we're always saying this every single year when this time of year rolls around. Oh my god, I can't believe the year flew by. Oh my god, where has time gone? Oh my god, we're updating again. It literally feels like yesterday that we were making the end of year book tags and the beginning of year book list, and yet some way, somehow we have found ourselves right back to the mid-year freakout tag, which is absolutely wild to think about. Some of you guys may be very familiar with the mid-year freakout tag, especially if you've been on BookTube for a while. Some of you might be very new to it. So just to give you a little rundown, just to catch you up on exactly what the mid-year freakout book tag is, it is essentially a mid-year check-in just to see where we're at with our reading, maybe our favorite books so far, things that we're still anticipating, things that we want to read before the year's over. And it's honestly a really great way to catch up on how all of our reading years have been going and to see exactly what we're expecting or anticipating from here on to the end of the year, which is always very nice to talk about. So I love making this every year. I have been making this one every single year since I started my channel 6 years ago at this point. This past week, we celebrated the 6th year anniversary of the channel, which is also quite wild to think about. So overall, quite exciting. Quite crazy as well that it's been this long, but I'm so excited to make this yet again for the collective, for the Citadel, so that we can talk about everything that we've been getting up to reading-wise. As always, because it is a book tag, there's a pre-made list of questions that I'm going to be running through. I will be leaving the original creators linked in the description, because I certainly did not originate or make this book tag, so you guys can go check that out if you want to see the originators, the trendsetters, if we will, from way back when, because this is, I believe, one of the oldest booktube tags ever made, so it traces back quite some time. But I'm so excited. As always, you guys can answer the questions as well in the comment section. Provide your own answers as to what you guys have been reading and how everything's been going so far this year, and we can get started with the 2026 mid-year freakout book tag. For question number 1, we have got best book you have read so far this year. And I do have to say, I have found some really great books this year, a very limited pool of 5 stars. As you guys might already know if you've been watching the videos this year, I have made it a big deal that in comparison to past years, I haven't been really finding a whole lot of consistent 5 stars. It's been very up and down, a little gem, and then you go back to the 3, 4 stars, and then you find a gem, and then you kind of cycle back through that literal cycle, valga la redundancia, where you have to fight a little bit in order to find a 5-star book. But I think, no questions asked, if I have to think about the best book that I have read so far, I do think I'm gonna have to go for A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This was one of my earlier 5 stars this year. I obviously vlogged it, loved it, raved about it. I've kept raving about it. In fact, this month I am planning on reading A Clash of Kings. It is in my monthly TBR, so I can't wait to roll around into this one over the coming days and start vlogging this as well and have a great time, because I've heard that Clash is even better than Game, so I think this is going to be quite exciting for me. However, all that to say, I think Game of Thrones has set a new standard for what I'm looking for in fantasy books. I think it is such a well-constructed piece of literature. I really do. And I know everybody raves about it anyway, and everybody's talked about their own personal experience with the A Song of Ice and Fire series, but I think George R.R. Martin truly gives a masterclass on how to write your characters, whether they're an antagonist or the protagonist, or if they overlap in some ways. I love that his characters are not villainous for the sake of being villainous. There's a lot of political background and a lot of generational stories that fill in these gaps as to why these characters present, act, behave, react a very specific way with the things happening around them. And I think that level of complexity and nuance to all of the characters really enriches the story, and it makes it so much more fascinating to follow. You have personal stakes in this because you know all the characters thoroughly well, which is something that I find I sometimes struggle to find when it comes to fantasy books. For the most part, obviously, the protagonist will have this really well fleshed out story, but when you get into the villains, the antagonists, these people that are opposing forces for our protagonist, I find that a lot of times it's just somebody's evil for the sake of being evil, and they're going to stand in their way just for the sake of being this almost Scooby-Doo villain. And honestly, Martin's writing is so refreshing because it doesn't feel that way ever. And it's such a big cast of characters that sometimes you might think it might fall into that section, but it never does. I think he crafts all of his characters with such care that, again, it makes the story super compelling. And while you're there for the plot and to figure out who's going to ultimately win this Game of Thrones, you're really there for the characters and their development, for better or worse, which I think makes it such a good story to read. I've talked about A Game of Thrones aplenty. You've probably also heard a ton about it elsewhere. You've probably already read it. You've probably already watched the adaptation. But A Game of Thrones essentially follows, particularly in this one where it opens, the Stark family all the way in Winterfell in the north of the entirety of the Seven Kingdoms, and their patriarch Ned Stark, who is about to receive King Robert Baratheon because his hand, his best advisor, the second most powerful man in the whole kingdom, has recently died. And Robert, because he doesn't trust the people around him, is coming into Ned's realm, so to call it, with the offer of becoming his new hand. These two have a lot of history together. They're best friends. They fought a war together. They secured the kingdom and the throne for Robert. And he believes wholeheartedly that Ned is the best person to fill this role, not only because of the amount of implicit trust he has on him, but because Ned is a very honorable guy and he knows he needs this type of person in this role so that he gets told off if he needs to, and he has somebody beside him that has got the people's best interest at heart always. This, however, is not an easy decision for Ned to make because he doesn't like being outside of Winterfell. He knows what this role demands, and that's not necessarily something that he wants to do. But a conspiracy comes up relating to the death of the Hand of the King that he feels he must investigate and look into because of some personal stakes as well. So he ends up coordinating everything to leave for King's Landing with the king, fulfill this role, see it through, see where it'll take him and his family. But then on the other side, in a different continent, in Essos, we have got the Targaryens, who essentially Robert and Ned stole the crown from, and they're trying to figure out how to mobilize themselves back to King's Landing, back to Westeros, with the right forces to reclaim said throne. And this threat is very present in the plot of the book, obviously. Story goes from there. Again, I loved every second of it. I feel like it's elevated perhaps the standard of what I'm looking for, specifically when it comes to high fantasy, where it's becoming harder and harder when I do pick something up to not compare it to this. I am starting to realize just how much, either way in general, whether for me personally or just for fantasy as a genre as a whole, how much this is the standard and why people say it so much. I think I get it now. I feel like I'm joining the dude bros in here with saying that this really is one of the best pieces of literature that I've ever read. I really do love it a lot. Question number 2 is new release you haven't read yet but want to. And I have plenty of those because I have received a lot of ARCs. Thankfully, I'm very grateful for them, but I've received a lot of ARCs this year. I have also gotten a hold of quite a bit of new releases that have come out in 2026. So I feel like I've got a nice pool to choose from. I will say, from things that I've gotten myself recently, I am really looking forward to reading Yesteryear by Caro Burke. Everybody's been talking about this. Obviously, a lot of people have had strong opinions, for better or worse, about Yesteryear, and this just seems like a very interesting narrative. I feel like we have gotten a rise and a surge of literary fiction novels that deal with the trad wife aesthetic, the lifestyle, and I am quite fascinated by the idea of a novel exploring all these things in somewhat depth and exactly what it means to exist under these parameters. And I think specifically in this one, knowing that we follow a main character who has built a social media presence out of being a traditional wife and then going back in time to an era where she would have to be a traditional wife, not out of choice, but out of this is just what is expected at the time. And this is the only role that you can fulfill at this present moment. What exactly it means when she realizes that this life that she has chosen for herself is not necessarily all that she has made it out to be. Think it sounds very interesting. I've also heard people say that there's a plot twist in here, and I'm still wondering how a litfic will twist. So we'll find out when the time is right, when I do end up picking this up, which I do think will be rather soon, but I'm so curious about it. So Yesteryear is definitely one of those books where I will say, new release, got it recently, very much looking forward to it. If not Yesteryear, I do have 2 other books that I also want to read relatively soon. One of them is definitely going to be The Poet Empress by Shen, which is, coincidentally enough, my current Patreon book club pick for our bi-monthly book club, so for July and August. So if you don't want to join us, the link for that is in the description. You can become an official maester of the Citadel. It's always a good time. This book has been branded consistently as one of the best fantasy books that has come out in 2026. And when I hear those words, I really want to experience it. Also, stunning copy. It's going to blind you a little bit because it does have gilded edges, which I will say, I feel as far as the edges go, maybe not so normal to stumble across. And then it's got these stunning, really beautiful end papers. And then also the hardcover itself is like really special. Honestly, these editions are getting crazy. I will say, I'm not a fan of how most of the books that I've been getting on hardback have been ungluing from the spine. I feel like it's made me more averse from getting hardcovers because they're getting really pricey, but the quality of them is not the best despite being very beautiful. I feel like we have suddenly prioritized beauty over practicality and perhaps shelf life, which I can't say I particularly love. So The Poet Empress is another one that I'm very curious about. We follow our main character Gwisin after the latest loss of a sibling, and because the kingdom is currently starving and there's famine and there's a civil war threatening to break loose, she decides to offer herself up as a concubine for the heir of the Azalea house, which I believe is part of their last dynasty in the premise of the book. And then she becomes the heiress chosen, which means that she'll have to harden herself and go through a lot of personal trials and training, I will assume, in order to fulfill this role, because apparently there is lyrical magic in this novel that I believe she wields in some way or something or other. There's like poetry magic. So I will assume she can perform it, even though it's technically only left for like royalty or the most powerful. I'm very curious to see how this will go, but I've heard the most beautiful things about the writing style and the characters and the plot progression. People just seem to have stunning things to say about this one. And again, everybody's been saying that it is, if not the best fantasy book that they have read released this year, or that it's one of the best books that they've read this year. So I'm very curious about that one. And then if I had to go for a number 3, I also recently got Land by Maggie O'Farrell, and you guys know a thing or two about me if you've been watching my videos. Historical fiction is not something that I gravitate toward very often, but Maggie O'Farrell is an author that I have been meaning to read for some time now, especially, obviously, perhaps not so obviously, but obviously to me, after watching the Hamnet adaptation. I absolutely loved that one. I also want to read Hamnet at some point. Who would have thought that Mel would have a historical fiction here with her? But I do. I know this one is set in Ireland before and after the Great Hunger, and we follow our main character Thomas and his son Liam, who are trying to map the whole of Ireland, but with British soldiers arriving any minute and tragedy suddenly striking Thomas and Liam, it seems like the job of finishing these maps falls entirely onto Liam, who is 10 years old, and his job is now to get his family back home, which sounds crazy. So I'm really excited about Land as well. I also think it's got probably one of the most beautiful covers I have seen recently. I know it's quite simple, but I don't know, there's something quite striking about it that I have been gravitating toward, and it's part of the reason why I ended up getting Land instead of Hamnet at the bookstore. I am very curious and excited about this because maybe Maggie O'Farrell will unleash a newfound love for historical fiction. You never really know. For question number 3, we have got best sequel you have read so far in 2026. That's actually a difficult one. I've not read many sequels this year, but the ones I've read, some of them have been really, really good. I do think it would probably be in between 2 different books, and I don't know which one to choose. Let me grab both of them. I'll be right with you. I have to get the Hero of Ages out of a stack. I think for me, it'd either be in between the Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which is the last book in the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy, or it would also probably be The God and the Gwisin by Sophie Kim. Honestly, such a difficult choice to make here because both of these were such good sequels in their own right. Very different books, very different tones, very different settings and pacings, but they both wrapped up their stories in such a beautiful way that both of these are highlights for me in 2026. Starting with The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson in the culmination of Era 1 of Mistborn, I think Brandon Sanderson did a beautiful job at bringing all of these different Easter eggs and small details and moments that we observed throughout the trilogy fully together by the end of this one, where it seemed every character got the ending that they needed, that they deserved, that was right for them, be it that it was bittersweet or happy or a little frustrating. I feel like everything happened and wrapped up in the best way that it could have, even in details that I was thinking, especially in The Well of Ascension, which was a very frustrating sequel. I genuinely was thinking, I don't know why any of this is important. I don't know if he'll circle back to any of these things and moments. And it just felt very, almost like a drag to me at the time. And then you walk into the Hero of Ages and you suddenly understand and see the purpose of everything, and everything feels deeply necessary. And it's funny because upon finishing the Hero of Ages, I seemed to appreciate the Well of Ascension so much more. I still have gripes with it that are not going to be removed by having read this book, but I do think the journey was well worth it by having read this final one in the series. I also talk about Brandon Sanderson a lot, as well as the Mistborn trilogy, which I finally finished after 5 years. I know it's been a long time, but essentially we are set in the world of Scadrial in the city of Luthadel, where ash rains from the sky, and the Ska people have been enslaved for thousands of years. And one of our protagonists, Kelsier, is hell-bent on getting them their freedom and to overthrow the Lord Ruler that has been an oppressive ruler for quite some time now. He knows that he cannot do it by himself, however, despite being a Mistborn who controls all different allomantic metals in this world, which is essentially one of the most powerful forms of magic available to them. And he gathers a crew of thieves and criminals and people from all different corners of Luthadel in order to pull off a heist, overthrow the Lord Ruler, and establish a new system. He also encounters another one of the protagonists, Vin, who is a Mistborn as well. She's become quite scrappy through having a life on the streets, and he is also determined to train her to essentially become his sidekick, right-hand woman. And the story goes from there. It's so beautiful. I loved it so much. I was sobbing by the end of the Hero of Ages. Such a satisfying conclusion, I do have to say. And I am so happy that I managed to finish this year, because I didn't think that I would. But then The God and the Gwisin by Sophie Kim is an interesting case of, it's part of a duology, so it obviously finishes a series, but this second book follows an entirely different premise from book one. In book one, you have a nine-tailed fox and a fallen trickster god who have to work together in order to solve a case of mass murders that are being committed by a nine-tailed fox. There's a really loud motorcycle going by. That said, however, book two, A Cruise Ship for the Dead, where our main character, the fallen trickster god Sokka, will have to team up with one of the dead individuals, a nurse by the name of Yukisa, in order to solve a murder that has happened on board. And they have to team up with a variety of different people as well that you would never think would work together, because alongside Sokka, he also brought his brother, the King of the Gods, and he also brought his therapist with him. And then we also have a K-pop idol, and then we also have a nine-tailed fox and a baby, and then a nurse. It's just the wildest group of people teaming up in order to figure out exactly what has happened, but it was so entertaining. It was so well paced. I also really enjoyed a lot of the themes here about soul bonds and about what exactly it means when you are destined for something, but the people involved want to make sure that there isn't an erasure of self. in order to get together, and that there isn't that pressure present to commit to something just because it is fated. What does it mean when you have the ability to make a choice? Is a choice something that you can make, or is this ultimate fate sort of inevitable for you? I really liked all of that exploration. I love how intimate the relationships felt in this one, how characters opened up to each other. It was honestly a beautiful story, so cozy as well, so comedic as well at times, despite it being on the heavier side sometimes. I did find it, that she found a beautiful balance in between all these things, and she pulled it off beautifully. That makes me very happy. Question number 4 is actually one of my favorites, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have several for this one. I will admit there are several sequels I'm looking forward to, as well as singular, I don't know why I said singular, standalone books that I'm also looking forward to. First off, the first thing that comes to mind immediately is Cursed City by Kate Golden. This is the sequel for Half City, also in the same series, the Harker Academy series. Such a good one that I read earlier this year. I had so much fun. It is a fantasy romance. It brought me so much joy. It reminded me of so many of my favorites like Shadowhunters, The Vampire Diaries, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Brought me back to the OG paranormal romance days, and it was so juicy. And I already have an arc for the second book. I got it digitally, and I'm very much looking forward to it. In Half City, we follow our main character Viv, who is a deviant hunter, which essentially is just their own word for a demon. And she grew up her entire life knowing that she was a deviant hunter because her dad brought her up in their ways. Then boom, because nobody stays alive, her father gets murdered. And this is something that she has had gripes with since it happened. She's never figured out exactly why her dad was murdered, exactly who had done it, and she's always been hell-bent on figuring that out. Suddenly, it seems like she gets an invitation to Harker Academy, which is an academy for deviant hunting. She wasn't aware that there was a community at large that did this. She thought it was basically just her family that was in this line of work, so to call it. And because there seems to be a connection between her dad and this academy, perhaps even his death, this is something that she says yes to in order to investigate his passing and potentially figure out an answer. But then she gets to this academy and weird things start happening, and she has to team up with some of her classmates in order to figure out exactly what's happening in the academy too. And there's also a little side romance between her and Reed, who is coincidentally a demon. He is one of the trainers at the school, and it's so juicy and so entertaining and so good. And just given how book 1 ended and some of the theories that I have for the series, the story at large, I am very excited for the sequel because I think it's going to be so nice. Another one that I'm looking forward to as well is The Knave and the Moon, which is the sequel to The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. Every single Rachel Gillig book for me has been a 5-star. She has not missed for me. I am so deeply excited about the culmination of the Stonewater Kingdom. It is truly one of my most anticipated releases of the year in general, but also one of my most anticipated sequels, I think, ever, because I can't wait to see exactly what's going to happen, because book 1 also ended in a crazy cliffhanger. We follow our main character, Sybil, who is a diviner at Aisling's Cathedral. This comes with its gripes because they're stripped of identity, name, story, possession when they get to this cathedral, but she has settled into this life quite comfortably, so to call it, with the rest of her diviner sisters. But then one day the new king comes to Aisling Cathedral with the hopes of getting his fortune told to him. She's the one that's assigned this task because she is the most talented diviner out of the pool of current sisters. And right after her diviner sisters start going missing, which is something she obviously wants to investigate, figure out, so she teams up with one of the king's knights, with Roderick Mundatius, an awful name, by the way. I hate his name with a passion, but it's okay because he's incredible. So they team up in order to figure out exactly where her sisters have gone and exactly what has happened, and things go from there. Beautiful exploration of religious trauma and what it means to give up your identity for the sake of a communion, if we will. It is honestly so good. If you listen to Ethel Kane, this entire book, at least the first one, I can also assume the second one, it genuinely feels like an Ethel Kane album. And would you find out, would you know, it was a big source of inspiration for Rachel Gillig when she was writing. So it just fits perfectly. I love it the most. Another thing I'm really looking forward to, which I can't remember. I can't remember if it's a standalone or if it's a part of a series, but Tempest by Victoria Aveyard. I have never read anything by Victoria Aveyard. I do have to say, I do have to admit, I owned Red Queen for like 10 years and I never read it. But Tempest? It looks so good. It's actually unreal. I read on the reels, on the Instagrams, something about a 10-year situationship with a pirate. And I only keep hearing the Hans Zimmer Pirates of the Caribbean score when I see these promotional reels and fan arts and commissions and things and beautiful, and I get really excited about it. I don't know anything about this one, mind you, but just the that's, in fact, don't say anything else. I am very excited about it. Anytime I see anything, I go, I want it delicious, sexy. And I hope it's really good. This next question makes me sad every single year. Biggest disappointment so far this year. And that's never something I want to even consider, think about, wonder about, even just acknowledge, okay? A truth universally acknowledged, I don't want to. But this year, I have to say, it comes to mind quite easily because I thought this book would be a 5-star and it was so incredibly disappointing. I still am mourning it. You can see tears fall from my eyes evidently as I speak right now. I'm kidding, being a little sarcastic here. Anyways, I will say though, The Strength of the Few by James Islington is most definitely my most disappointing read so far this year. I was hoping to love this, especially after reading The Will of the Many and enjoying that so much. But the second book just had so many structural issues with it that I couldn't look past everything that was very confusing, convoluted, underdeveloped in here, and I give it turnovers in my head. I'm like a little, what do they call it? Like the Lazy Susans? Like I'm like circling around how much I liked or disliked this book. Essentially in the Hierarchy series, we follow our main character Viz, who is an orphaned boy at the start of the series. However, he gets adopted by one of the most influential families in the Katenan Republic. Through his adoption, he gets alerted of a bigger conspiracy that there is a secret weapon being housed in the island of Solivagos, which also houses the Katenan Academy. In order to figure out if this weapon actually exists, he has to infiltrate this academy and figure out all its secrets. And with its secrets as well, he is meant to investigate the death of his now uncle, because apparently they say there's foul play involved. And he, against his best wishes, has to do all this because he doesn't want anything to do with the Katenan Republic in general. He wants nothing to do with its people, with its hierarchy system, with its magic system, which involves seeding your will. There's a whole caste system in here, a whole pyramid scheme. You are meant to receive a certain amount of will from other people and seed a certain amount to the people above you. And Viz has got very specific reasons why he wants nothing to do with this. And the story essentially goes from there. I, again, really loved book one. I am tired of saying this. I loved book one with a passion, but the ending of The Will of the Many sets up something very ambitious that I was already wondering how book two would navigate. And I will say parts of it were very successful while others felt very frustrating to me. And book two introduces two new POVs that we obviously had no time with in book one. So carrying from that main storyline, which follows Viz, plus these two more felt a bit unequal. You already met Viz, had almost 700 pages with him in the first book. So having to build these other two perspectives, these two very distinct people in distinct places, you don't really have as much time to flesh everything out as well as he did in book one, meaning that for me personally, I just did not have enough time to bond with these characters and the side characters that were introduced in these different perspectives enough to care as much as I do for Viz and Iqua and Amisa and all the people around him. So I think that was one of the most frustrating bits. Also, tonally, these three perspectives are very different from each other, which also threw me off time and time again. As I was switching between perspectives, I would keep flashing forward and turning my pages to see exactly when I would make it back to this, because I was thrown off by the setting, I was thrown off by the tone, by the characters involved. It just did not feel, I guess, of equal quality as book one. And all of that made for a very rocky reading experience, as well as you hear about a lot of things, but you don't see them because the world keeps moving and things keep happening off page. But they're important moments. They're important establishments of relationships and bonds that I think are very important for us to see in order to illustrate why characters feel and bond a specific way with other people, instead of, again, being told it offhandedly as if it isn't something that matters, when evidently it affects the rest of the story moving forward. So I think all of that became really frustrating for me, as well as the fact that certain things happen in the main POV, which is Vis's POV, that a lot of the time feel rushed or random or done for shock value. And I think if we would have spent more time with him, more time in that perspective as well, given that it's the perspective we know the most, maybe certain things would have gone over better. But yeah, I think the way that James Islington handled all of that was not my favorite at all. I'm looking forward to book 3 very cautiously, being cautiously optimistic here. But yeah, book 2 was just a little rougher than I would like to admit. On the opposite side of biggest disappointment, we have got most surprising book so far this year. And for this one, I have 2 actually. One, which was a reread, it was a reattempt, a retry, a book that I didn't necessarily think I would pick up ever after I DNF'd it a couple of years ago. And then another book that I was also cautiously optimistic about, and it paid off handsomely for me. And that first one I actually have over here because I finished this a couple of days ago, and that is Heavenly Bodies by Imani Irio. Feels so wrong to say Irio because I keep saying Erio. It's like the Spanish-speaking self comes in and I'm like, Imani Irio. Just have to say it that way. It feels more natural to me. Anyways, Heavenly Bodies was such a nice trip for me. You guys know, or you probably know, you might not know, I'm not a romantasy girl. I really am not. I struggle a lot with romantasy as a convention. I think the idea of it sounds appealing, but the execution ultimately, time and time again, has failed me, done me dirty. It's just not my thing. And because of it, I rarely go into it because I know to get into it and read something would be to not have a great time. And I would rather avoid that like the plague. I don't need to subject myself to things that I don't think I'm going to like. However, Heavenly Bodies was going to be an experiment for me because I had seen people that also don't tend to read romantasy enjoy this one and have a good time and look forward to book 2 and now looking forward to book 3. So I figured, let me go ahead and give it a try. A lot of people had also said, like in my life, oh, I didn't really love it. And because I am ever the contrarian, I also figured if people didn't like it, then I might like it, because that's generally how things tend to go with me. And oh boy, did I really have a great time with this. We follow our main character, Elara, who is the new queen of the kingdom of Asteria, the kingdom of shadows. She has recently lost her family because of a prophecy that has been spoken that involves her and the king of stars. He comes in, smashes her whole family to bits, and quickly after she is kidnapped by the king of the kingdom of light. And the whole pretext behind this kidnapping is that he wants to train her to be a weapon in order to kill the king of stars, because he has his own motives for it. So he will delegate her to his son, Prince Lorenzo, in order to get trained. And the two end up forming a bond that neither of them were expecting. Perhaps nobody could have really anticipated. And the thing goes from there. It obviously says it's an enemies to lovers. I just throw enemies to lovers out the window because they never really are enemies to lovers. Whenever I see that, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's gonna be, oh, I'm the misunderstood villain, or I have reasons, or I'm like the tortured hidden hero because my parents actually hate me. There's always something in the middle of it that makes this alleged villain antagonist actually not antagonistic, because if it were actually true enemies to lovers, and I still have my questions about it, she really would be all out for loving getting up with Ariette, which honestly, don't be scared. To all authors that are listening, don't be scared. Just give me a good actual villain hero romance. That would be fantastic. I would love a book about a love that corrupts. It would be so nice. Hear me out. You have to be very open-minded here, but just know I want it. And I know there's people that want it. But yeah, I had a great time with this. I loved their banter. I loved their yearning, specifically Enzo's. This man was down bad for her. He was saying, I want to worship you and I want to look at you first when you walk into any room and I want to know what a queen tastes like and all these different things. And I was like, sir, please stop. But also, please keep going. Please keep talking. And I love that Alara as a main character kind of breaks up a lot of these conventions in romanticies. She's the one that wields shadow magic, which I think was really interesting. She also owns her power. Like, she experienced a lot of trauma at some point of her life, but she is not out of the loop when it comes to her abilities and her powers, or even the fact that she's queen and she has to step up to this role at some point. Like, she knows all these things and she wants to do all these things, but there's very specific circumstances standing in her path she has to essentially slay in order to get there, but she is unafraid to do so. There's moments of doubt, but she knows what she has to do, and I like it because I think in comparison to a lot of other romanticies, it played out somewhat differently, and I think that was refreshing. But also Normal People by Sally Rooney. I recently read this in a vlog where I was giving this a retry after DNFing this in I want to say 2021. It's been, I think, about 5 years since I DNF'd this at this point. The first go around that I read this, I really took everything for face value. I hated the characters. I thought them so deeply unlikable, and that hasn't changed. Hear me out. But I loved it all the more because of it. I really think my reading tastes have changed over the years, and I appreciate characters that are complex. Maybe we don't agree with their decisions. Maybe we don't agree with the way that they're going about certain moments and certain situations and their lack of communication skills. I was really frustrated with Marianne and Connell the entire way, but it honestly made for such a rich, compelling narrative that I could not put this book down. But we essentially follow Connell and Marianne, who meet in high school. Connell specifically, his mother is Marianne's cleaner at her manor, at her house. Her family is very wealthy, which is quite the opposite of Connell, who comes from a very working class family. His mother had him when she was very young. The two end up striking this very intimate relationship, very much in hiding. Nobody knows, not even their parents. And this is something that they do not display at school, primarily because Connell fits into the popular group at school, and he knows that because this is the one thing going for him, because class is a huge theme in this novel, he really can't give up that status that popularity gives him in ways that money cannot, because he doesn't have that. So he knows that to be seen with Marianne would be social death, essentially. So they keep this relationship a secret, which obviously at some point of the novel weighs heavy on this relationship. And so after we move from their high school years into their college era, we continue seeing how these two people are always in each other's orbits and each other's lives, and how them getting back together, meeting at different points in life, is sort of this inevitability, it seems like, where they cannot seem to exit each other's lives, and they're always there, permeating every thought and every moment. And I really loved it. There's really nothing I can say in a short way that truly encapsulates the complexity of the novel. So I will leave the reading vlog linked down below in case you guys want to watch that, because I did talk spoilers. I think mostly thematically, I tried to not touch certain specific moments in the book too much, but in depth, though, I managed to speak quite a lot about the thematic elements of the book that I think make it such a great novel. So if you would like to give it a watch, it's there, but just know, Normal People surprised me, because initially I hated her. But I think once you manage to look past the unlikability of the characters and you really look at the themes that make them the people that they are and how these things intrinsically affect their relationship, hear me out, is really great. Our next question is favorite new author, debut, or new to you? And I will say I don't have any new solid ones based on what I have read this year that have solidified their spots as a new favorite author for me. But I will say out of the new ones that I have read this year, and I'm reaching for them because I have them all on the right-hand side, I do think Sally Rooney has a chance, which I never thought I would say, because you guys know I really made it a personality thing for such a long time to say that I hated Sally Rooney's books. But after reading Normal People, I think that if I read 2 more books by her and I end up really enjoying them, she will become an autobi author for me. This is why you never say never, kids. This is exactly why you don't say things and set them in stone, because anything can happen. I also think, just based on the singular novel I have read by S.A. Cosby, I think he also has a chance of becoming a brand new to me favorite author. I do have All the Sinners Bleed by him, which I got recently and put into my July TBR. So hopefully by the time that I read that and maybe rate it highly, which I can't imagine that I won't just based on his prose in Razorblade Tears, I feel like he is a strong contender for becoming a new favorite author, just based on, similarly to Sally Rooney, writing these very complex situations and nuanced characters that at face value might be one thing, but when you read the circumstances surrounding their actions, who they are, how they grew up, it really paints a more complex picture of who they are and why they present the way that they do. And I really like that. Again, complex characters are some of my favorites, which is why James Baldwin might also be a new favorite author for me. I think it entirely depends on what happens after I read some other of his work. I did request one of my friends who's coming to visit from the UK to bring me some more James Baldwin so that I could read that and again continue to figure out if he could become one of my new favorite authors, because I think after Giovanni's Room, again, complex characters, nuanced situations, everything about the way that they were brought up intrinsically affects the way that they show up in adulthood. All these things are things that I enjoy reading about in novel form, and all of these authors accomplish that beautifully. So James Baldwin might be another one, but I can't really say much because for all 3 of these authors, they all do the same thing that I enjoy, but I have only read a singular book by all of them. I mean, for Sally Rooney, I have read more than one, but at a different point in my life where I feel is not representative of the thing that I like now, as evidenced by my retry of Normal People. So yeah, I feel like I need to read a bit more of these 3 authors in order to make any definitive statements, but honestly, 3 strong contenders right here. For the first time in years, I feel like I have got a definitive quick answer for this one. You guys might know, if you've watched some of these videos of mine, I always struggle with the newest fictional crush question, and I think I won't struggle this year because, first of all, Deacon from Half City, from the Harker Academy series. I love that little white-haired man. I do. And you guys already know, a white-haired love interest will always freaking get me every single time. So I love him the most. He has a very small appearance in Half City, but that singular appearance was very memorable, okay? And that bonus chapter in the Fairloot edition, very memorable too. I really love him. I do. So I have to say Deacon stole my heart. I keep thinking about him every day. I love him the most wherever he is. To follow up that character question, we also have newest favorite character. And I do have to say Seysid from Mistborn Era 1. I love Seysid so much. I've always loved Seysid. Always been one of my favorite characters in Era 1, but I think after finishing the entire arc and knowing his character progression, everything that he goes through, all of the questioning in his faith that he goes through, and the complexities behind that as well of trying to find an ultimate answer of what to believe in and what to pray to, perhaps, knowing full well that there are so many options out there and it's difficult to decide what is branded as truth, and being perhaps reluctant to join in on a fight that he knows he has to be a part of and having to join it anyway, despite everything that he is going through and pushing past his depression and his grief and his perhaps lack of understanding for a lot of things, but seeking those answers anyway. I genuinely think out of all Mistborn characters, he is perhaps one of the most human when it comes to all of his internal monologue and the things that he is trying to work through. And I really enjoyed his character. I really do. And I've loved him for years, but now that I am done with the series, so much more, I do have to say. Oh boy, you guys know I love to do this with books. A book that made you cry. I like crying, okay? I like crying for no reason whatsoever, and if a book is gonna make me cry, even better, because then I have a reason to cry. And I will say I'm gonna reach back out and I am going to pull Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This book made me bawl my eyes out. I finished this during a sprinting round. You guys saw my tears. They were aplenty. I was sobbing uncontrollably by the end of this book. I'd watched an interview prior to starting Giovanni's Room, and James Baldwin was talking about how he had essentially written a novel about a person who became dangerous through his inability to love unselfishly. And I didn't necessarily realize what that would look like when walking into this book, but when I walked out of this experience, I realized just how much his selfish way of loving without giving himself any true agency or grace or perhaps room to understand himself, as in David, the main character of this book, and what that resulted in for the people in his life and how his love came at the expense of so many, was truly the most gut-wrenching thing I think I have read in a hot second. We follow David, our main character, who is an American in Paris in the 1950s. He has recently gotten engaged to Hella, his fiance, but Hella wants some space from him. She wants to figure out if being engaged, getting married, and living a very specific life that they have talked about leading together, if that's something that she wants. So she takes a solo trip to Spain while David stays behind in Paris. And it is during this time that he ends up meeting Giovanni, a bartender, that he strikes up a relationship with, an affair with, while Hella is away. And this comes with a lot of inner questioning, inner turmoil for David, because he is obviously not out as a gay man, and he has a lot of internalized homophobia despite the fact that he knows he is into men, and a lot of his experiences in the past with men have essentially resulted in him denouncing himself and calling it immoral, a sin, time and time again. And it's very heartbreaking to see exactly what that manifests into in his relationship with Giovanni, being the one person that he seems to have loved above anything or anybody else, but that love still did not beat the things that he had to work through. And to know that this love had so much inner destruction, even just for David as an individual, oh my God, it was definitely something to read. And I love the entire intersection of this book about how being of a specific identity or group of people does not erase the fact that you could hinder other people's quality of life or life experience. And I don't know if any of that was particularly intentional at the time of writing it, but I found it so interesting that David is very much a transphobe still, and he is very misogynistic, and alongside a lot of the other male characters, they all hate women, and they expect women to obviously do specific things and present a specific way, while also over-sexualizing women, especially as queer men. It's just very interesting what ends up resulting here from such an old novel. It's honestly such a good one. I, again, cried so much. It was so beautiful, despite all the heartbreak and all of the complicated bits of David's character and the men surrounding him. And I can't wait to read more James Baldwin. This was honestly such a great place to start, I think, with his backlist, and I can't wait to read some more. On the opposite end of that, we have got a book that made you happy. I think that's definitely got to be The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 1. This book was honestly such a pocket of joy for me when I did pick this up. I also have to say, if not this, actually, wait, I hadn't even thought about Dungeon Crawler Carl. Dungeon Crawler Carl made me laugh so much, especially through the audiobook. A lot of the things that were happening in here were absolutely outrageous, which comes as a surprise to nobody because it is a lit RPG dealing with a main character who is trying to survive an alien invasion, especially through entering a dungeon crawler game with his ex-girlfriend girlfriend's cat, who at some point of the book also gains the ability to speak. She is quite the brat. I love Princess Donut so much. And then the AI overlord system that essentially gives out all of the messages and everything that's happening really, has a foot fetish. And then he's fighting against all these different bosses and talking to all these different NPCs, and the things that happen in here with a lot of the different aliens and the interviews that they have to do, because this is also being televised across the galaxy, was honestly so kooky and so crazy that I had to laugh quite a bit, and it made me very happy despite the moments of stress, and I can't wait to dive into book 2 this month. However, also the unselected journals of Emma and Lion made me happy for a very different reason. Emma is such a joyful main character, and despite some of the more awful things that she experiences due to the mistreatment from her cousin Archibald, I will say her lighthearted spirit and her joy of life and her joy of the little things honestly made me really happy. Emma, obviously existing in the 1800s, is the kind of woman that doesn't really adhere to any of the conventions at the time. She is unmarried. She has no desire to marry. She wants to stay independent, manage her own household. She wants to build her own library so that she can enjoy all her favorite books and have them present at her home. And she wants to gossip and talk to her loved ones and jot everything down in her journal. And I think all of these things, like the small things in life that really make the experience for her, was so beautiful, and it made me so happy. Again, despite those moments where I was frustrated by other people in her life, I think it was such a joy to read from her journal entries and see exactly what was happening in St. Crispian's, but more specifically Lapis Lazuli house, where she lives, and that is her rightful estate, the thing that she must inherit, against Cousin Archibald's wishes, if we will. And I honestly had a great time, and I do plan on reading volume 2 this month, because I do have it right here alongside volume 3. I do have them both, and I might read them both this month, because you never really know. Nearing the end of the list of this tag, we have got most beautiful book you have purchased so far this year. I think The Poet Empress is a good contender for that, which I showed you earlier. It's a very beautiful copy. I will say, if not The Poet Empress, I do think the Dungeon Crawler Carl books are quite beautiful, even if they perhaps don't have like the most special things to them. I think the covers and the spines more than make up for, you know, like the lack of details perhaps on the inside and the end papers. I really enjoy these covers. I think they're really beautiful to me personally. But I will say, arguably, objectively, the most beautiful book I think I've gotten this year, I think has to go to Direbound, if I can pull this out of the shelves. It's up here. I am very small, as we know. But Direbound by Sable Sorensen, I think, is a stunning book. I ended up getting the deluxe edition with the stenciled edges. So all around, you have got some really great details. And then if you see the end papers, it also has some really cool illustrations, front and back. But then let me show you this as well, because it's got some foiling at the front of the cover, which is very nice. And honestly, for an edition that you can get at the bookstore, is really nice. I'm not gonna lie. Definitely rivals that of like Fairy Loot and Illumicrate. But then you also have this, which I'm very excited to experience myself, if I do say so myself. And I'm hoping I like this one, because I would really like to read this and Furybound. So I need to continue it, because I did start it, as evidenced by my bookmark in there. So I need to continue this for sure, so that I can figure out if this is maybe another romantasy that I can get into this year, because that would be nice for me. And last but not least, books you need to finish before the end of the year. Every year I answer this somewhat the same. I always say the books in my physical TBR. I think especially now that I see the end of the tunnel and we have really worked through my physical TBR, I have added some new books, I will say, which is probably a little detrimental to me. But despite adding a couple new entries to the list, I will say I am doing so very good with my physical TBR, and we still have about like 50 something books left, which I think we'll get pretty much to the low end of that at the end of the year, which will be so nice. That to say, however, if I have to choose like a singular book that I'm like, please, for the love of God, Mel, finish this before the year is over, it is absolutely going to be Emma by Jane Austen. I started this back in January. I was really enjoying it, and I have not finished it. I am still on page 81, okay? I did like my little chapter breakdowns and everything here. I was annotating the book. I have like my post-its in here. I was doing the most. You see, I was doing everything. And then I fell off the bandwagon and I didn't continue her. So if I had to choose anything, it would be to continue following the shenanigans of Emma Woodhouse, figuring out her matchmaking skills and exactly what's going to happen between her and Harriet. And if Harriet is ever going to put her in her place and stop being a yes woman. And if Emma will learn her lesson and stop meddling with people's lives because it's the only thing she knows how to do. I'm loving it. But I definitely struggled with the writing style because it's definitely a challenge for me based on the things that I typically read and not being used to this writing style. So I definitely have to go back to this, not give up and finish it because I, as a not native English speaker, if you would believe, you would never think that, I definitely struggle to read olden languages. That's so dramatic, but I definitely struggle to read books like these. So if I had to say like point out anything specific that I do have to finish, I would say it's definitely this book right here. And that is everything that I have got for you guys today. That is the mid-year freakout book tag. Once more, year 6 doing this. And those are my answers this year. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, I would love to hear you guys' answers for any of these questions. Some, all, many, however you guys want. You can leave them down in the comments and reply to these as well. Or if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, I would also love to know. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure that you give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe down below for more content like this. And if you reach the end of the video, let us leave some chair emojis in honor of Emma. Maybe all of the chairs in the comments will make me actually finish the book. So if you reach the end, let us leave those emojis down below. And if you want more content from yours truly, want more streams, extra content, a book club, a Discord server, a ton of buddy reads, we do have a Patreon. You can become an official maester of the Citadel at the top of the description. You can join us, all the fun, and I promise you, you won't regret it. You will have the time of your life. And it's also a great way to support the channel outside of the YouTube-y things, which I am eternally grateful for anyways. I appreciate every single one of you that watches the videos, likes, subscribes, comments, joins the streams, does all the things. I appreciate you guys more than words can say. I am so stupidly grateful that I have been doing this for 6 years, and I hope to never stop. I hope to keep plaguing your screens for a lot more to come. I will say I love what I do so much, and you guys have made this possible over the years, so I thank you immensely. And I am so happy that we get to convene here every week and chat about books and to talk about the things that we love and just fangirl together. It's so, so very special. So thank you to every single one of you watching these videos. Thank you to my patrons for supporting the Patreon. And that is all that I have got for you guys today. I have been feeling very emotional as of recent, and if I think about it too much, I will definitely cry. But I love you guys so, so much. I appreciate you definitely more than I could ever say, and I will see you guys in the next video. Love you all, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye.